Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at all of the key players to be bringing into our FPL sides ahead of game week 13. So let's not waste any time, let's get straight on with it. So quick bit of housekeeping before we get started. A big shout out to Objectives Matt, who correctly guessed I was wearing an Austria 2016-17 shirt at the start of the last video. If you want a shout out on the next video, simply just guess what shirt I'm wearing. Pretty easy one this week, but whether it's home or away and what season it's from as well would be very important. So the first one to get that right gets a shout out on the next video. Now, to talk about João Pedro, who has been phenomenal these past 2 weeks, he will certainly be one of the most bought in forwards and picks in the entire game ahead of game week 13. So I've just started recording now after the end of the Southampton-Liverpool match, in which Southampton fought pretty valiantly, but still managed to give up 2 or 3 really big chances in that 90 minutes. And I think this is just going to be a symptom of the way they play throughout the season. So no question about it, Brighton playing at home against Southampton, who will consistently play out from the back, make mistakes in that final third for Brighton and gift them the ball, gift them possession several times. Any forward player for Brighton is going to have a decent chance at attacking returns in that fixture. João Pedro in particular has been fundamental to the way that Brighton have been building up their attacks in the last couple of weeks. Now, obviously, came off the bench against City, really turned the game around when he came off the bench as well. There was a real aura about the way he was playing. And then starts in game week 12. Now, he didn't get that many minutes. I think he went off around 63, 64 minutes in game week 12. And that will maybe be the only thing that puts people off going for him this week. However, that to me isn't much of a concern. We know Baleba had just been sent off 5 minutes prior, and given the fact that they were already winning the game, I wouldn't be surprised if this substitution was more about team shape and structure so that they were a little bit solid going into the final 25-30 minutes against Bournemouth. Now, obviously, they saw out the game, the plan worked, and Pedro, who has been building up minutes over the last couple of game weeks, was probably also brought off as the easiest player to maybe not take a risk on in that forward line. Now, another week will have passed. They're playing the Friday night game against Southampton, and I would expect João Pedro to start again and get good minutes in that match. Now, obviously, if they're winning 2 or 3-0, he might come off a little bit early, but the data suggests that if they are, he's the player who's most likely to be the one at the end of those chances, either assisting, by the way, extremely good assist data for a forward, or goal scoring. And again, the data here is very, very good. Now, the per 90 minute data that we're looking at on screen here is 0.73 XGI per 90, which on the surface is absolutely phenomenal for a player who's under 6 million. You can't really buy better than that anywhere else in the league. And the fact that he's also very likely on penalties as well, he really does tick all of the boxes right now, and I'm struggling to come up with any reasons that I wouldn't be bringing him in this week. The only reason is, of course, his injury records. Now, he has been in and out of the side over the last couple of seasons, but they have been fairly cautious with him, and if he gets anywhere near decent minutes in the next 5 or 6 game weeks, for the value he's at, 5.6 million, I think you can take that risk, take that chance on the upside being good enough that, who knows, he could get injured again, but at his price, he could easily be your 7th or 8th attacker. I myself am looking at a rotation of him and Morgan Rogers as a sort of hybrid 7th to 8th attacker, and rotating them in and out of my 11 depending on the fixtures. If that's the case, if he does get injured or misses 1 game week, it's not the end of the world. And again, I can't iterate this enough. The upside on this player, considering his price point, for me, is probably too good to ignore. That matched in with the fact that the fixtures are also absolutely phenomenal all the way through the Christmas period. And he's in a really strong attacking side who are at the moment in a Champions League spot. I really don't have many reasons why I personally wouldn't be buying him myself. I've got DCL, and making that maneuver just seems like the most obvious, easy thing that I could possibly ever do. So for me, he's almost certainly going to be in my side come game week 13. Will he be in yours? Let me know in the comments below. So every single week at the moment, it seems like we're talking about a different combination of premium players, but one premium player who rarely disappoints is Bukayo Saka. Now, obviously, he's had little injury doubts here and there this season, but generally speaking, he's been absolutely world-class from the outset, and any of us who have just kept him in our sides throughout the season have been duly rewarded. Now, Arsenal are coming into a fantastic, very long period of good fixtures now, so bringing him in over the next few weeks, if you don't have him already, a quarter of the game has him, so 3/4, by that logic, don't own this player already. I think he'll be top of the wish list for me and a lot of other managers over the next 2 or 3 game weeks. Now, the jumping on point with Saka is going to be really important. Other premiums also have good fixtures this week coming. Palmer at home to Villa. Salah, even though it's Man City on paper, that's tough. Considering the way City have been playing, Salah's going to be a very popular option, and most of us already have him anyway. So squeezing in Saka isn't the easiest thing in the world for a lot of us to do. So a lot of it comes down to your team structure, whether or not you've got Erling Haaland. If you do, then you might want to look at maybe a double swap to downgrade him to maybe a João Pedro, maybe a couple of other strikers that I'll be talking about in this video to come. And then maybe bolstering your midfield with Bukayo Saka. Now, the data so far this season is generally reflective of the type of player that I feel he is. So XG per 90 of 0.27 isn't as high as the likes of a Palmer or a Salah, but it is still pretty decent, and especially when you add that into the XA data of 0.36, he still comes out as a very good attacking threat. And another thing that we've mentioned a few times on this show over the last few weeks is the changes to the bonus point system. Now, last season, I think this data was still good and it still would have been very, very positive. But the way that the bonus points are structured this season and the way the system is structured really aids the goal-scoring midfielders and those who are good at chance creation, ball retention as well, passes generated or successful passes generated. And Saka is one of the few players that really does tick every single one of those boxes. We saw it earlier this season as well, until a last-minute adjustment. I think he was on 3 bonus against Leicester, despite not even getting an attacking return. So that is really saying everything we need to know about how creative he is, that he can still get very close to top bonus without even an attacking return. So any game that he gets any sort of return in, he's very likely to not just get a 5-point goal or a 3-point assist. It's more likely to be a 5-point assist with 2 bonus included, or an 8-point goal with the 3 bonus on top of the goal. So someone like Saka at 10.1 million, I think, is going to be insanely good value over the next stretch. And it's more about what point I want to jump on him as a player. Now, over the next 5, Fantasy Football Hub are predicting almost 35 points. Now, again, you always take that with a pinch of salt, but that's on average just under 7 points a game. It just goes to show how important he's going to be over the coming weeks. And the fixtures, even after game week 17, by the way, are absolutely phenomenal. So he's top priority for me over the next few weeks, but I can't quite get there with free transfers this week. So it's very likely going to be for next week or maybe even the week after, which does hurt me, particularly because that West Ham game right now, the way West Ham are playing, I would bet on him doing very well, maybe even a couple of returns in that match. And then Man United, we don't exactly know how they're going to look under Amorim just yet, but the bets are that he'll probably be setting them up to be a lot more competent than they were in the last few weeks of the Ten Hag era. So I would think that that may be a more challenging game than West Ham, but Saka, even with 1 return, as I've just discussed, could come away with a 9 or a 10-pointer. So I still think it's a good jumping on point, even in game week 14. And then after that, Fulham away, Everton home, Crystal Palace away, it is still a fantastic run. And one way or another, most of us are going to want to find a route to Saka this week or in the next couple. Now, I probably would maybe stand clear of taking hits to bring him in and force him in game week 13 if you've already got a couple of premiums in there. And I certainly wouldn't be selling the likes of Salah or Palmer to get to him. But I think the dream scenario here is having a triple premium midfield of Saka alongside Salah and Palmer. And I will, over the next couple of weeks, be trying to move heaven and earth and adjust my funds so that I can squeeze him in to a 5-man midfield with those other 2 premiums. And I think that is going to be the way that maybe unlocks the most FPL points over what will be a really busy, congested fixture period over Christmas. And we know the players like Saka, but also like Salah and Palmer, are going to play almost every single minute of every single game, as long as they're fit, of course, over that period, because they're all so important to their teams. And Saka, one last point to mention, with Ødegaard playing in that number 8 role in just behind him, in that pocket behind him, gets so much more joy from an XG point of view and has much less emphasis on having to be the creative outlet. He can cut inside a lot more. We saw it in game week 12. And he's got much more license to get his shots off and to get into much more advanced goal scoring opportunities, with Ødegaard maybe dropping out and playing that kind of playmaker role, with Saka much more the focal point. So I think with Ødegaard back, he's an even better FPL asset. With the fixtures to come, that's another tick in his box. And with the minutes, penalties, everything else going for him, he's going to be right at the top of my list over the next few game weeks. And I'm very jealous of anyone who can bring him in game week 13. Now, I've spoken about Nicholas Jackson a fair few times over the last few game weeks, but the thing that's been putting me and a lot of other FPL managers off of him is that 4 yellow cards issue that obviously means that if he picks up the 5th, he gets a suspension. Now, he keeps kind of playing on that a little bit and just escaping the yellow card every single week at the moment. And I think it is only a matter of time before we do get that suspension served. However, with that to one side, I think he's an absolutely incredible pick over the next few game weeks. And we've talked a lot about Cole Palmer. We've talked a lot about Chelsea's fixtures over this next period, all the way through to arguably even March now, looking really, really strong. And it's not just Cole Palmer that could be extremely beneficial to have in our FPL sides. And coming in at nearly, well, in fact, exactly 3 million less, Nicholas Jackson could be a really interesting differential for those of you who are willing to overlook the 4th yellow card and just say, you know what, that is the reason no one else is going there. But if I've got 7 other strong enough attackers that I can just afford him to get suspended 1 week and just bury him on my bench, then you've got yourself a really good differential all the way up until that point where he does serve his suspension. And if he escapes a yellow against Aston Villa, which, by the way, another decent fixture for attackers right now, he gets to play Southampton away from home. If he escapes a yellow in that game, it's Tottenham away from home. All of these are games in which I'd expect goals for Chelsea. And Jackson playing in that number 9 role ahead of Cole Palmer at the moment is getting even better underlying XG data than Palmer himself. So despite the fact that he's got the 4 yellows, he's not on penalties or anything like that, he is getting a lot of big chances, on average 1 point something a game at the moment. So that's very decent, and a number of smaller ones alongside that. 11 attacking returns too in just 12 game weeks. He is on absolute fire right now. And 7.9 million, he's competing with the likes of Havertz, who obviously just got benched, Dominic Solanke, who's been at times frustrating this season, and even Ollie Watkins, who has again at times been a little bit on a cold streak and also getting subbed off early sometimes too. So Jackson around this sort of price point is one of the better assets, and I think it's really a direct head-to-head between him and Alexander Isak as to who is the better pick over the next stretch. Now, I think Isak just edges it on the fact that he's got penalties, but Jackson's injury record is a bit better. He's also got the better fixtures overall, I would say, and for a longer period of time. And he's in a very slightly better attacking unit right now too. And if you wanted to go a slightly different way, Jackson seems to be a really good differential pickup with great underlying data. He really seems to be fitting this system very well, undoubtedly first choice. And even over the Christmas period, I still think the minutes are going to be really, really good, considering the output he's been providing Chelsea so far this season. Again, I'm not going to go there, mainly because of that yellow card thing, but we saw it years ago with another Chelsea striker, with Diego Costa, who every single week FPL managers were just not going there because he was on 4 yellows. He could get suspended at any given moment, but because a lot of the yellow cards that Jackson or Costa in years past were picking up were due to things very much under their control, mouthing back off at the referee, maybe putting in a late tackle at a defender when trying to win the ball back. These are things that are definitely controllable. And if Jackson has game intelligence, he should be able to avoid those sometimes too. So again, I wouldn't let that put you off too much. Just make sure if you do go there, that you've got another 8th attacker that can come in if he does receive that 5th yellow card, because I think it will come at some point, but up until the moment that it does come, you've got yourself a differential that most other managers are going to be scared off of. So Matheus Cunha is a player that we've been talking about a lot on this channel for a few weeks now. In fact, the first time that we did talk about him, I think he was at 6.5 million. He's now up at 6.9. I'd be surprised if he wasn't 7 million or even maybe slightly more come game week 13. And another fantastic standout performance in game week 12 that will certainly raise a lot of eyebrows of all the FPL managers out there looking for a new forward. We've already talked about Jackson. We've also talked about João Pedro in this video. I think the only thing going for João Pedro over Cunha right now, maybe two things, is the data is slightly better, but also he is over $1 million cheaper than Cunha. But what you're getting for Cunha for that extra 1.3 million that he has over João Pedro is the fact that he is so talismanic, so important to what Wolves do, even more so than João Pedro. And he's just so far the standout player in their 11. Whereas with João Pedro, or Jackson as well, we could also talk about, these players, whilst very important to the way they play, aren't quite as stand out the best player in their 11, and therefore at times they might get the early sub, they might maybe even be rotated out for a week if you're unlucky. With Cunha, I think it's really difficult right now to see either of those two things happening, and I've talked about this a lot over the last couple of game weeks. With the busy fixture period to come, having a player who is on the whole, a 90-minute man who is that attacking, that important to the way they play, and every single ball that is played in and around the final third, Cunha has got something to say about it. Wolves are no doubt at all set up to create this guy chances and to put him in pockets of space so he can also create other attackers chances. Now, he's not the out and out centre forward for Wolves. He's playing just in behind Strand Larsen. But again, I don't really see that as a massive problem. In fact, what it does do for Cunha is that a lot of centre backs right now are almost taken up by Strand Larsen, and they're leaving spaces for Cunha to operate in front of those centre-backs, giving him chances to be creative, chances to get shots off in and around the box. And the underlying XA data is higher than most other strikers you'll see, slightly below João Pedro, who also plays in a similar kind of way, but still very, very promising. Now, what this does for him as a pick, I've talked about the bonus point system for Saka. It also benefits Cunha, who is incredibly creative, the life force of the team going forwards, and every single attacking return he gets right now, he seems to be getting bonus points attached to it. So a 4-point goal is more like a 5, 6, 7-point goal. An assist is more like a 5-point assist right now, maybe 4 points. And everything he does seems to get those extra little add-ons. Now, that for someone under 7 million is really important. The fact he's on penalties is really important, and set pieces as well. So he's got every single box tick that I would look for in an FPL asset. And when you've got fixtures like this, alongside with what we would call form, he's on a very hot streak right now, and a lot of analytical managers would say that that is unpredictable. It could end at any time, and I would completely agree. But what that form, in inverted commas, gives you over the last few game weeks, it means that he's very unlikely to get rotated out, and every single pass played in and around the final third is going to continue to flow through him because he's got his teammates' confidence right now. So I would see that as a hugely positive thing, and everything that Wolves do, I would expect to continue to go through Cunha. And again, 4 out of the next 5 games, I absolutely love. But the sooner you bring him into your FPL side, the better, because after these 5 fixtures are out the way, it does get a little bit more difficult. Now, that's not to say he won't be good value. At 7 million, with penalties, with set pieces, 90 minutes, even against Man United, Spurs, I think Forest after that, they're not awful fixtures, and you don't think that there's no chance he'll get an attacking return. But if you want maximum benefit, especially by game week 15, I would say, that's the best time to be bringing him in. But 13, even better, because then you get the Bournemouth game as well. Overall, again, another player I wish I could get to without a hit this week, but I don't quite have the funds to be able to bring him in alongside someone like a Saka in a couple of game weeks. So for now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to watch and wait and hope that he doesn't continue to get double digits hauls every single week. So after Arsenal finally kept a clean sheet after a long time waiting for owners, I think it's going to be a signal for a lot of FPL managers to hop back on Arsenal defenders, much to the frustration of those of us who have held the double Arsenal defence or even single for the last 5 or 6 game weeks without any joy, any clean sheets whatsoever. But the data has consistently been good, and I think that Arsenal have been on the whole unlucky not to keep more clean sheets than they have done. Now, I've put Gabriel on screen as an example, but this could easily apply to Raya in goal. It could apply to Timber, Calafiori or Saliba at the moment, who look like the first choice defenders for Arsenal right now. And I think Saliba and Gabriel in particular, as the most nailed ones, look like very good pickups if you don't already have them ahead of the upcoming fixture run for Arsenal. Now, looking at the fixtures in particular as a starting point, West Ham is obviously a pretty good opportunity for another clean sheet for Arsenal. And what we tend to find with these good defences is that around the Christmas period, around the congested fixture period, they try to conserve energy wherever possible, and they try to shut up shop and win by 1 or 2 rather than going for 5 or 6, and just try and be as solid at the back as physically possible, reduce the chances against them, which means that when they do go forward, when they do score that first or second goal, it's much more likely to result in a win, and they don't need to exert any additional energy where at all possible, because the games are coming thick and fast, and conserving energy is going to be really important for Arsenal. The defensive data I put on screen as well is a bit of a difference. XGC per 90 of 1.01 for Gabriel, who has played, I think, every minute of every game so far, isn't absolutely amazing compared to what they were last season, but it's still very good. And considering they've played away from home against some of the best sides in the league already this season, it's only going to get better from here. And obviously a good performance at home to Nottingham Forest, followed by West Ham, and then I think the most difficult game in the next 5 is Man United at home, and then Fulham, Everton, Crystal Palace. I think there's a good chance of 3, maybe even 4 clean sheets in the next 5, and then after that, I mentioned it with Saka, the fixture run is far from over as well. So again, I think considering how few clean sheets are being kept on the whole by FPL assets this season, finding players in good defences who have a better chance of keeping clean sheets is obviously going to be of prime importance. Now, to talk about Gabriel in particular just for a moment, because he's the player on screen and probably will be the most popular buy ahead of game week 13 if you don't have him already. That goal threat, although we haven't seen it recently and it hasn't paid dividends recently, 0.12 XG per 90. Obviously, that's part of the 0.16 on screen, but heavily weighted towards the goal threat in particular could be a little bit of additional bonus for us over the next few game weeks. Now, I've held on to him since the game week 6 wildcard. This is the first points I've got from him, and it's only 6 points, so I'm not getting carried away. But if they can get a clean sheet every other week from now until the end of the season, he's probably going to be decent value for money, considering he's going to get a couple of bonus here or there, and he's probably going to get a goal or 2 before the end of the season as well. So I do like him. I like Raya in goal. There might be better value at 4.5, but I think now, if you're interested in Arsenal defence at all, now would be a good starting point to start investing in them again, and having double Arsenal defence will be a pretty decent differential over the next few game weeks, considering I think clean sheets are going to come flowing back to them in the next few. So one final player that we should probably talk about tonight before we wrap up the video is Marcus Rashford, who of course scored the opening goal of the Ruben Amorim era and looked good at the start of the game. Obviously got the tap in, played, up front, out of position, classified as a midfielder in FPL, played centre forward for United in what is a new system under a new manager. So, is he an exciting pick or not? Well, he is certainly a player that will be interesting to some managers. We know through seasons past that when a Man United player starts doing well, there is a very quick frenzy towards them because they've got such a big fan base worldwide, and that makes a lot of sense. And Rashford, in the past as well, has been a fantastic FPL asset. In fact, 2 seasons ago was even challenging for the captaincy some weeks and went on a really hot streak at the start of the Ten Hag era, where he kept scoring most weeks. I think I even triple captained him successfully 2 or 3 seasons ago. So he's got plenty of FPL pedigree, and scoring 5 points for a goal for an out of position midfielder playing up front could be absolute gold dust. But I would put the brakes on Rashford as a pick just for now. It's certainly a player that I will be keeping a close eye on, but with the fixtures to come over the next 5 game weeks, starting with Everton, who have just kept back-to-back clean sheets, followed by Arsenal, Nottingham Forest, and Man City. 3 good defences, objectively. Now, Man City have had their problems, but 4 game weeks' time, you'd imagine they sort it out eventually. It's not an easy run. And another thing that is very interesting is that it is early days under Amorim, and he got substituted on the 67th minute. So clearly there was something that he didn't like the look of, or he wants to test out different strikers in that position. Brought on Højlund, brought on Xerxes as well. So there are alternatives up there. Now, that's not to say that he won't get minutes, but we've seen already this season he's far from a guaranteed 90-minute player, and he's not on set pieces, he's not on penalties. That will almost certainly still be Bruno in the new system. And I'm just not fully convinced we've seen enough just yet, just because he scored the goal, that I can recommend him as a pick just yet. I think there will be a lot of hype around him this week, and maybe justifiably so. First goal under the new era and playing out of position. But I'd pump the brakes just for now, and I don't want to recommend him to you just yet because the fixtures over the next few aren't great. We'll get a bit of a horizon on him over the next few. We can watch and wait and figure out whether or not he is going to be an effective FPL asset who does get good enough minutes, who is playing out of position consistently. If all of those things are true, then he will be a potentially really good asset at 6.9 million. But for the time being, considering how many other good midfielders there are available to us in FPL, I would say that he's a watch and wait for now. Now, Man United generally as well, I would also maybe apply the same advice. If you've got Bruno before this week, then absolutely you hold him for Everton at home. Potentially hold him even longer than that, but there are going to be a lot of moving parts in the new system. We saw that already against Ipswich today, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are teething problems as well. So the next 5 game weeks, I think it's a good opportunity for us to wait and see and maybe watch them closely until we figure out who the best picks are going to be, who the most consistent 90-minute men are, and whether someone like Rashford is going to consistently be playing out of position. If so, gold dust. But until I think around game week 17, maybe even slightly beyond that, I would probably just put him in the watch list column for the time being. Now, as I wrap up today's video, if there are any players that I haven't talked about that you'd like me to discuss, either way, either to buy or to sell, let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get back to all of you before the game week 13 deadline. In the meantime, if you could leave a like if you've enjoyed today's video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see future content, that would be really, really helpful to me. I'm pushing towards 2,300, which might not sound like many subscribers, but to me, that is another little milestone, and growth has been a bit slow recently. So that would be massively appreciated if you could do so. For the meantime, though, good luck ahead of game week 13, and I'll see you later on in this week as I'll start looking towards team selection and all of the key updates facing our sides ahead of the deadline.